Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. This week we have Natasha Monaghan. She's a senior broadcast consultant at Recruitment. Welcome, Natasha.
Hi, Ben.
Well, welcome to the show. I'd like to start to kick things off and ask you, how did you start off, and what did you do to get into the industry?
Okay, well, it was a long time ago, and I studied audiovisual production. And then I really tried to get in, and I wrote to every company, and I just tried to be a runner, to do anything to get in anywhere, and I just got a million rejection letters. And in the end, it was the old cliche, it was a friend of a friend who got me in, who basically put in a good word, and then I got a job as a runner, a library runner for Pearson Television in the old days, which then turned into London Playout Centre, and then was bought by Ascent Media, and then became Encompass, was acquired by Encompass. So that's the Encompass of today, but it was in Stephen Street years ago.
Right, awesome. And was there any sort of like calling signs for you, Natasha? Was there any like flags that stand out, and looking back you're like, that was a sign that I was destined for the industry? Was there anything like that for you?
No, I think I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and I think that would be my advice to people these days is to really try to figure out what it is you want to do, because I think I was a bit of a drifter, if I'm honest, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I know I wanted to study something. I liked film, I liked being creative, I liked writing stories, and so I kind of drifted into picking an audiovisual production course, and I wanted to move to London, so I picked one in London, and that was it really. And I didn't know what that was going to lead to. I didn't really know what job I wanted to do, and as a result, I mean, I got this job as a runner, and I did kind of float around within transmission sort of library operations for quite a few years then. And I really enjoyed it. I mean, I fell into a job that I really liked, and it suited me because it was dealing with lots of different people, but I didn't really have a plan. And and then a few years later I fell into broadcast recruitment, and that really wasn't a plan either. So I think it's all worked out well for me, but I would probably recommend people have more of a plan than I did.
Yeah, I guess it's wherever the wind took you then, Natasha.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's perfect now. I mean, I say now, I'm absolutely living the dream. I do the job I love, and I've got quite a flexible arrangement, and it just suits me really well. So I'm very happy where I've ended up, but I wouldn't have known that's where I was going to end up when I was 18.
Yeah, sure. And so in between sort of leaving that production course and the first like runner job that you had, how did you feel during that period? Was it a bit like apprehensive? Was there a lot of like expectations on yourself, or did you feel quite free? Was it quite...
What, before I started working?
Yeah. So you said you did your course, and then you sort of managed to get a job as a runner through a friend.
Yeah.
But was you sort of just, sort of shooting from the hip with the CVs, like hoping you'd find something, or
yeah, absolutely.
Was it quite liberating time for you? I don't know.
No, not really, because I think I wanted to stay in London. I had the pressure of having to pay the bills, and I really needed to get a job. And whilst I was trying to get a job, I was working in an old people's home. So it wasn't, it was all right because I was young and I was out all the time, but I didn't have much money. And I really wanted to get started and do something exciting. And I mean, when I went to Pearson, it was really exciting. I was just a runner, but we did, in those days, Pearson looked after Discovery, Disney, all the Flex Tech channels, and it was a huge operation, and there was loads of people there, and I met so many people, and in those days we went to the pub all the time. It was perfect for you, sort of, fresh out of uni person. So it was ideal, and there was a lot to learn. And it wasn't when I got a job within the library and I sort of moved up within the library, it was never a particularly taxing job. I mean, it had its problems, but you could do the job and have quite a lot of fun as well.
Yeah. I mean, but you've got to start somewhere, essentially, right? And once you've got that foot in the door, you then have the opportunity to get a job in the library, and then like experience different like teams and departments, I guess, in broadcast.
Yeah, it was a great job, I think, because it did connect with lots of different areas of the business. So you did learn about what everybody, what QC did, what transmission did, what format transfer in those days it was called, what they did, and what the client coordinators did. You really got to understand it all. And I think from there, I kind of moved up, and then I really wanted the management position. But I think because it was, various politics and whatnot, I never was going to get that management position within that company. And actually, I was asked to go and interview at a different company, which was Showtime Arabia, and I went there and I became library and tape traffic manager there, which was really exciting, because when I got there, I thought, oh God, this library does actually loads more than our library ever did, because we did subtitling and all sorts. And so that was a real steep learning curve for me. I remember getting in there and thinking, oh, I don't know, I don't know if I'm ever going to learn this job. And I had sort of 2 weeks handover. But it was, really good fun. And I really enjoyed that.
And I guess I wonder what the sort of average time people spend in, one particular role. Is it, sort of a few years and then people would move on? Do you have any insight into that, into your sort of recruitment world?
I think it really varies from person to person. And I think, I know people who have started in the same job years ago, and you can look at the two of them, and one maybe stayed doing that type of job, maybe different companies, but mostly staying in the same company. Another person, exactly the same skill, has kind of moved around to different companies. And I can think of two guys now, and one of them is, a really senior person. He's working in a different country now. He's very senior in a company. And the other one is still in the same role. So I think it depends what you want, I guess. But most people, well, no, I can't even say most people, but I think some people will stay in a role for 2 or 3 years and then want some progression. And whether they can't get that, then they move somewhere else to get that progression. Or some people are just happy doing what they're doing. I mean, me, for example, now in recruitment, I was managing a team previously, but that's not the focus of what I do particularly now. I mean, I do manage people when it's required, but my focus now is to be a really good recruiter, because I'm balancing that with being a mum. So I don't want at the moment to manage a big team, because I'm just not, there's not enough of me to go round. So I wouldn't be doing it well enough. And I think, with you, Ben, perhaps your focus is not being a manager, being a director of technology. It's being a good at what you do, and then going, traveling.
I mean,
things like that. You don't want to commit to a big management role, or.
I mean, for myself, I've spent many years in the same role, but in recent times, I've sort of moved on at pace to different sort of consultancy sort of roles. But it's interesting how you say, the A/B test of one person staying in a role and they started in the same position, and the other person, progressing way up the sort of the ladder, essentially, and they're both probably still happy in their career, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that just the balance, of what people are looking for is different. People are different, aren't they? And so some people really strive to be management, and some people don't. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with either of those things, or nothing right with either of those. It's whatever suits you, isn't it?
Absolutely right. And so I'm curious, when you made the leap from the sort of broadcast sort of management roles and roles in the industry to becoming that recruitment consultant, was the wind just taking you? What was that like?
It was more about personal circumstance, because we were living in London and we decided to move down to Dorset. And I didn't really know what I was going to do, because I couldn't find sort of any opportunities. And I actually fell into working for a company who knew somebody. It was just a case of, the role I'd taken when I first moved to Dorset was telemarketing, because it was the only thing I could get. So after a while, I said, well, I know broadcast and I know about being on the phone, and that's quite, a huge part of recruitment is picking up the phone and speaking to people. And so I convinced them to sort of take a chance on me, and then I stayed with that company for 9 years, and I only left them, once I'd had my baby, and wanted to go back and do things a bit differently, and then I've been with Benetton Broadcast now for 4 years.
Brilliant. And So I guess you have that first-hand experience with the roles, and I guess speaking to your clients who are needing sort of positions filled, you're sort of the conduit, aren't you, between experience in the industry yourself and speaking to those candidates and
Well,
sort of working out with the client, what's the best lineup for the interviews.
yeah.
Yeah,
Hopefully, I've got some understanding of what people are trying to achieve because I've been there, and I've been particularly at that play out end of getting it on air, and making sure nothing's missing and it's all in the right place, and having to change schedules at the last minute when things aren't right. So I understand that, but I think I learned a lot when I was in the industry, and I've probably learned a lot more being a recruiter because I've learned a much bigger, wider picture of it. Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to think that I do understand. I'm not going to ring anybody, hiring manager right before Christmas and demand some of their time, because I know that that's the busiest time for them. They're trying to get all the Christmas schedules sorted, and depending on the job. Lots of it's different to when I worked in there. So I have had, as a recruiter, I've had to sort of stay current and keep my technical knowledge, as up to date as I can to understand what the changes are, because it was very different when I was a tape librarian at Pearson Television, and we used to, run the tapes round to the transmission suite on a trolley, and it's not it's not like that anymore. That was, that, as I say, that was one of the fun bits of the job, because you got to go and have a chat everywhere you went with your trolley. But yeah, so it's very different, and it's about keeping on top of that and understanding. And I was more operational, so I'm not a technical person. I'm not, by no means am I an engineer, but I can, have a good enough understanding of how it all works to hopefully, recruit.
Yeah, sure. And so our listeners, if they're sort of newcomers, and that could mean they don't have any academic or professional qualifications, or it could mean they're coming out of sort of broadcast media courses. What's it like nurturing that talent and developing candidates so they're best prepared for interviews and getting jobs?
Well, I mean, I think it's good to nurture people as they're going through a course, or even at the point before they've decided what they're going to do. But they don't often come to me, before they already know what they're going to do. But I think I've spoken to people, and particularly last year, I spoke to quite a few people who were in the third year of their studies. And normally it comes to the point where I'm speaking to them right at the end of their third year when they're starting to look. But last year I spoke to people who were sort of, in the beginnings of their third year, and thinking, well, it looks like I'm going to be doing a lot of my lectures on Zoom, and I might be able to do a job whilst I'm doing, the third year of the course. And I have actually placed somebody who's in that position, and they're managing the course and the job, and the employer are being really flexible about giving them the time to finish their course. So that's worked really well. But I think nurturing people is... it's about helping them know what's going to make them stand out from the crowd. They're already standing out because there's not a huge amount of young broadcast technology graduates. So there's a few to choose from for an employer, but there's not that many employers that are going to try and snap them up. I mean, I was having to think about this, Ben, because we were talking about it before, about how many companies do hire graduates, and some have their apprenticeship schemes, and some do it kind of ad hoc as they need to, and some do it as a bit of a matter of course because they, budget wise, it works better for them to get people in fresh, train them up, perhaps don't pay them as much as other companies might, but it works well for them. But it may not work well for them in actually retaining that talent. Once the guys are trained up, they may kind of move on. But I think it's important to talk to the graduates about what makes them stand out, what makes them one of the ones who will get hired. If there's not many jobs to choose from, how do you make yourself be the person that gets picked? And it's got to start with your CV, because that that's the first thing people see, and you've got to get a foot in the door. And I know companies, I'm trying to speak without giving too much away, because a lot of what I do is confidential, but a company I worked with last year had 2 CVs. for a graduate position. And the CVs were from people from the same university and the same course, and they interviewed one and hired one. And just the difference in the CV is one was more, I guess, more relaxed, chatty almost, about I've done this, I've done that. And the other one was very, I just came across as somebody with a more technical brain, because it was, you know, these are the things I've worked with, these are the technologies I've worked with. And when I did this particular role, or, you know, whether it was at university or a bit of work experience, I did this. And it was very, you know, these were the technologies I worked with, I did this. And the other one was, you know, I worked with a team of people, I did this, I did that, but it was very, not woolly. I don't want to say woolly because that's not fair, but much more relaxed in style. And the more technical seeming CV got the interview, got the job, and the other person didn't get a chance for an interview, which wasn't really, you know, fair, because they were both really good candidates. But I think that's useful. Another thing that will make people stand out from the crowd, and I don't know how well this will work in COVID times, but if somebody now off their own back and got a load of work experience along with their course, that always works really well. And I can't think of anybody that I've ever dealt with that has got a load of work experience on their CV and hasn't got a job straight away, because I think that it just shows how willing you are to put yourself out and do stuff, and obviously how much more experience you've gained. I think, you know, I can help prepare people for interview, but at the stage, and I do have, you know, if I suppose you'll direct people to me if they want to talk to me about anything, but if I can prepare people for interview, and I've got loads of stuff, but I would say my most important points, because you're a graduate and you don't have a lot of experience, people at interview aren't expecting you to have a lot of experience, so they're not going to throw a load of technical questions at you and expect all the answers. They're going to try and gauge what you know, what you've learned, but what they want to see is an aptitude for learning, and the right proactive attitude, and honesty, really. So if you don't know something, you don't try and blag, you know, because you think that's what they want. They just want to know where your knowledge is and what gaps to fill. But I think it's, you know, at that stage, it's all about attitude. So.
And I guess you was talking about the CVs and how some CVs work better than others. Is developing a CV more about getting a newer version that might sort of get you more interviews, or more sort of, you know, more opportunities to get in front of those hiring managers? It's a constant sort of process, right?
It is. I mean, I don't think you've ever really finished your CV, and that's a bad thing to say, because it's a bit of a job, isn't it? Especially when you've been working for a number of years and you've got loads to put on there. But I mean, I look at obviously hundreds of CVs all the time. And there's loads of myths. People say your CV should never be longer than 2 pages. And I don't really agree with that. I think if if you're 50 and you've done loads of stuff, it's quite difficult to put that all into 2 pages. So I think it's about getting a balance. You're not waffling on forever, but, you know, you are being quite concise, but putting everything in there. And if you've done some really, you know, senior or complicated jobs, and I mean, this is not newbies now, but that information needs to be in there. You know, somebody who's, if you're looking at senior management level and, you know, you're the general manager or vice president is looking at your CV, they don't want like a couple of sentences on some really complicated project. They want to know exactly what you did. And I think that's true, I guess, of graduates. If you were doing something, you know, like a big project at university, because I know some of the universities put on broadcast shows and things like that. And so you will be playing a role in that. So I think it's important to have in there exactly what you've done and how you've done it, and not just, you know, I was the director of this show, because, you know, that doesn't show that you understood what you were doing, really. So it's about being more precise with your language, and also looking at what you want to apply for, and thinking about, you know, going back to this, have a bit of a plan. Do you want to apply for anything, you know, like I did, and just get a foot in the door? Or do you want to be more specific and try to go for an engineering role if you want to be an engineer? Or will you take a role in an operational area and try to move across? But I think if you do that, you need to understand the difference between companies, because some companies will take you in any role and eventually move you, and some perhaps you might end up being stuck where you've gone in, and so you could waste 2 or 3 years in an operational role that's going to give you no further steps towards getting into engineering. So what is the best thing to do? I think that's when agencies are quite useful, because they can talk to you about the right sort of company to get your first steps in, and whether that company is going to sort of offer you long-term progression, or whether that company is going to be somewhere that might be better for you to work for a year or two, and then move on somewhere else. But equally, I work for my clients, so I'm not going to say to somebody, get that job, do it for a year and move on, because that's not what the client's looking for. But sometimes the client is looking for that, and they don't expect anybody to stay longer than a year or two. So it's about me balancing up the needs of the client and the candidate, and kind of advising the candidate in the best steps for them, really, to get what they want to do. And also, I think it's worth candidates really thinking about the degree they're taking. I didn't particularly think about the degree I took. I just wanted to do something fun in telly in London. But if you want to be an engineer, particularly if you want to be an engineer or something technical, go on the right course that offers you something that's going to be a bit more future-proofed. Some of the courses are still maybe leaning towards older technology, and you want to be as current as possible when you come into the industry. Really, I think IT skills are quite key. You'd agree with that, I'm sure. And some, I see some graduates who don't really have much, they've done broadcast technology, but they don't really have much idea of sort of basic IT skills and networking and things like that, which are pretty key these days.
The sort of broadcast engineering IT worlds are sort of slowly combining, basically. And just to keep on that advice for the newcomers, if you could talk to your sort of 18-year-old self now, Natasha, what would you say to yourself?
So much. I tell myself so much. Well, I think to be more focused, to think about what I'm doing. And I think, when I think back to myself at 18 or 20 or, 25 even, I was just, taking each day as it came and having fun. And I never really planned very much. And, I think things are different now. I see some of my friends, and I've got friends of all ages, and I see friends of mine who are in their 20s, and they're so much more focused about what they want out of life, and, how they're going to achieve that. And none of my friends or me were like that in our day. We were just out for having fun. So I think I would just encourage people just to think about what you want to do and how you can achieve that. And I do think it's useful to have an agent, somebody like me on your side that can give you a bit of advice at different stages. I mean, I've got people who I've placed as graduates, and then I may have placed them 2 or 3 times because I've been doing this 13 years, I think. So I have placed it, some people quite a few times, and it's always, lovely to get somebody their first job, because they, are so excited about it. But it's really nice to stick with those candidates and get them, further jobs and see them progress through their careers. And try to give them advice along the way about, what the next step could be for them, because if you're going in as a graduate engineer, what can you, you can do all sorts of, you can go into solutions, you can go into management, you can just be a freelance support engineer or a project engineer, or there's so many different things you can do. I think, you're not going to understand it all when you're a graduate and you've never worked anywhere. But I think within a year of being in a company and seeing what other people do, I think you should really start to formulate what you want to do. And do you want, is work the be all and end all for you? Do you want to be at the top of the tree, or do you want to be, something a bit more flexible?
Yeah, Yeah, that's great. I guess it must be good seeing those, candidates develop. I guess you've LinkedIn's quite a big part of the any industry really, and Veneta's got a couple of sites on there, but you've got a broadcast part on LinkedIn, right?
So that's it. We've got Veneta Broadcast, so that's all our broadcasts. The broadcast jobs will be on there, and news and things that we're up to, so that will all be on there. We have got a website as well, but I think probably the LinkedIn page will be more up to date, on a daily basis of what's going on.
Yeah, that's LinkedIn, Veneta-broadcast. I'd just like to say thank you, Natasha. That's been an amazing talk on your take on broadcast recruitment and helping newcomers into the industry. So thanks very much.
It's a pleasure. Hopefully it's been helpful.
No worries. Talk to you again.
Bye-bye.
Bye.